I mentioned in my overview that we would be, this session would be focused a little bit on the work that we're doing in neuroscience. And the afternoon, we were going to shift to some artificial intelligence, machine learning talks, but I lied. We're actually going to have a talk this morning by Jing, who's the head of machine learning for our Symposium folks. And she actually couldn't be with us today. She's on business in China, in fact. And given the time difference, we were cordial enough to allow her to join at a somewhat reasonable hour. But in advance, she actually recorded her presentation. So we're going to replay her presentation, followed by a live Q&A. She'll, technology willing, will join us from China after her presentation. So with that, can we roll the presentation, please?
My name is Jing. I'm a technology senior manager at Dassault Systèmes Symposium. My presentation topic is 3D surrogate for mitral valve regurgitation simulation, predicting transient responses and 3D fields in seconds with deep learning. What are surrogate models and why are they so important for physics-based simulations? Physics-based simulations are performed at different scales covering diverse physical domains. Continuum simulations at the parts and assembly level are widely used for product design. These simulations usually employ 3D finite elements and therefore delivers high-fidelity results. However, they are often computationally intensive and may take up hours and days to execute. Logical level simulations execute in seconds or minutes, but is of lower fidelity. To combine the benefits of multi-scale simulations, surrogate models derived from these expensive 3D models could massively reduce execution times to seconds or interactive times, allowing a high number of parameter evaluations in the design space. However, traditional surrogate models are often of lower fidelity and provide limited information through a few scalar KPIs such as maximum stress, maximum pressure, maximum intrusion. To maintain the richness of 3D simulation results while significantly reducing executing time, this talk presents a neural network-based approach with the ultimate goal to enable 3D quasi-interactive design exploration. In order to make proper medical decisions, scalar KPI predictions are sometimes not enough. We also want to look at the 3D deformation of the mitral valve quickly in order to perform patient screening. To retain the richness of the 3D simulation results, while significantly reducing the executing times, this section presents a neural networks-based approach. High-fidelity mitral valve co-simulations are used as design of experiments to generate the data. The 3D simulation results are processed and used to train fast-executing neural networks as 3D surrogates. Neural network algorithms and architectures such as deep feed-forward neural networks, recurrent and recursive nets, neural operators, etc., are chosen depending on the nature of the physics and data. The proposed approach extends traditional model surrogates to cover both transient physical responses and 3D fields, which could enable an information-rich, much more productive environment for making medical decisions. In case you're unfamiliar with deep learning, here is a very brief introduction to a few basic algorithms. This slide shows the fundamental feed-forward neural network. It mimics a network of brain neurons and how they process the signals. Given a set of input, each layer of the neurons are activated by a linear transformation by weights and bias, given the prior layer of neurons, and then activated through the activation function. Some common activation functions are plotted on the right. The activation functions serve as nonlinear transformations of the prior layer signals and therefore making neural networks capable of learning from high-dimensional data. This slide shows a particular recursive net called the LSTM. Unlike feed-forward neural networks, recursive nets are able to remember the past via long-term and short-term states. The inputs to the network include both the current state and past memory. The inputs are first connected to a few fully connected cells and then passes through either regression operations, such as one of the common activation functions listed in a previous slide, or gated operations, such as the sigmoid function. The output includes both the future states and updates to the past memory. Recursive nets and other newer algorithms, such as transformer, as used in GPT, are designed to process sequential input data. Let me take a few seconds to introduce the medical condition we're trying to simulate. Mitral regurgitation, or MR, is a disease that when the left ventricle of the heart contracts, instead of pushing the maximum amount of oxygenated blood to the body through the aortic valve, some of the blood instead leaks back into the left atrium through the mitral valve that isn't fully closing to prevent such backflow. The mitral valve is composed of two leaflets, namely the anterior and posterior leaflets. The presentation will focus on providing visual representations of the mitral valve from both a top-down perspective and anterior-posterior sectional views, as illustrated on the image on the right. For this 3D surrogate study, we leveraged the 600 virtual patient simulations. A 90% 10% split was done for training and testing. And the VPs were created using Latin hypercube sampling. We used neural network algorithms, including deep feed-forward networks, recurrent and recursive nets, and etc., to create a surrogate model to predict the mitral valve area history and displacement field. Our in-house long short-term memory architecture was used with minimal or no hyperparameter tuning to test the capacity and predictiveness of such a network. Two separate trainings were done, one for orifice area history and the other for the displacement fields, as both are time transient quantities. Finite element analysis results contained 175 time points of the orifice area and displacement fields for each cardiac cycle. For ML prediction, only 15 time frames per cardiac cycle was used for displacement to reduce the computational time. All the time frames were used for the orifice area. Regularization schemes such as norm penalties and dropouts were used as required to prevent overfitting. To evaluate the accuracy of the leaflet morphology resulting from the machine learning predictions, we performed a manual qualitative classification according to types A and subtypes B. Briefly, we looked at leaflet configurations at mid-systole at 30%, 50%, and 70% sectional views, and top-down views to classify types A1 to A4, which are qualitative indicators of how the leaflets come together globally. We looked at leaflet top-down and also generated a bar graph of the gap length according to the entire line of cooptation at mid-systole at cut planes from 0% to 100% in increments of 10% to classify subtypes B5 to B8, which are quantitative indicators of how the leaflets come together locally. We performed the same classification for both finite elements and machine learning test predictions and compared the outputs to evaluate the accuracy of the leaflet morphology. The training results based on the displacement field output showed that 59 out of 60 virtual patients, which is 98% accuracy, have the same classification types for type A1 to A4. Additionally, 50 out of 60, which is 83% accuracy, have the same classification for subtypes B5 to B8. Accuracy for the subtype is lower due to a few factors. First, we are only using 15 timeframes to train the machine learning model. Second, a better sampling strategy could have been used to minimize the extrapolation cases. And third, because the machine learning model doesn't recognize contact, leaflets over closures sometimes result. And the gap length calculation algorithm doesn't recognize the negative clearance, but instead classifies any non-zero values as an opening. The algorithm could be modified to account for this, but the machine learning model won't recognize the contact physics and still could lead to subtype differences. Here we show some example orifice area history predictions. An acceptable match for most patients was achieved, but some discrepancies in the regurgitant orifice area were observed for some patients, marked by the green dashed circles. Note that this is really a result by our default machine learning configurations using existing simulation dataset. The accuracy can be further improved by optimizing the machine learning hyperparameters, using a better sampling method, or continuous learning from added samples. Each of these machine learning predictions only requires 0.09 seconds on one GPU, where the finite element analysis requires 2.7 hours on 20 CPUs. So you can see that the efficiency gain is huge and fundamentally changes the way the transient history response may be used for quick screening. Here we show some example 3D deformation prediction for the training cases. The accurate training prediction indicates that the network capacity is sufficient to capture the 3D displacement field. The focus in the machine learning is really how to improve the generalization capability by exploring regularization methods such as early stopping or ensemble learning, or simply improving the sampling strategy. Here we show some of the best and the worst 3D deformation predictions for the testing cases. Machine learning predictions are compared to finite element analysis for the A to P2 CART views and top views during systole. The top panel illustrates the best 4 predictions, while the bottom panel illustrates the worst 4 predictions. Overall, good agreements were achieved for most testing cases between the machine learning and the finite elements results in their entirety. Even the worst results show very similar closing patterns without any tuning of the neural network, just using existing data set. This video shows a prototyping software interface demonstrating how a 3D model surrogate can be used for semi-interactive 3D exploration, leveraging the machine learning technology that I just described, and that we are in the process of embedding as core features in our products. The bottom left shows the leaflet in the undeformed configuration, while in the top right, it shows the real-time calculation and display of the machine learning predicted transient leaflet predictions during the cardiac cycle. As you drag the bar, the calculation occurs, and you can immediately visualize the leaflet dynamics for this particular leaflet parameter setting. Users can also modify the leaflet's parameter settings in this tree, and the machine learning will immediately update the new prediction. For example, in this demonstration, when we reduce the anterior-posterior diameter of the annulus, you could observe the change in the response. The annulus diameter is reduced in the animation. Next, we increase the anterior leaflet length ratio, which elongates the anterior leaflet in both configurations. This software interface offers a powerful tool for visualizing and exploring the dynamics of the mitral valve leaflets. Besides the mitral valve, we've also validated and proposed the methodology for a number of benchmark models covering different physics, analysis types, and model sizes. This slide shows 6 structures-centered challenge problems. Model 1 is a dynamic impact problem. The training data was generated with Abacus Explicit, covering a number of geometric design parameters as inputs, and outputs are the reaction force histories and the 3D deformation field. Model 2 is a statics example simulating the landing gear component under various airplane landing conditions. Model 4 is a thermal-mechanical welding process predicting welding parameter-dependent temperature field evolution and residual distortions. Model 5 is a static buckling analysis predicting geometric-dependent buckling behavior of plastic bottles. Model 6 is an EV battery pack under side impact. This slide shows 2 flues challenge problems. Model 1 shows good machine learning predictions of air pressure and velocity field around the airfoil given different airfoil geometric designs. Model 2 shows a good surface pressure predictions on an automotive external surface given different car designs. As a conclusion, we have proved that the proposed methodology worked well for all these benchmark problems with satisfying prediction accuracy. The deep learning model inference time ranged from milliseconds to seconds. As compared to actual simulation cost, we obtain many thousands times speed up. To enable better model deployment and usability, we are currently developing a new software app, the Performance Guide app at Simulia. We combine the joint power of our 3D experience platform and the power of deep learning. Benefits that come from deep learning including, for example, categorical data and geometric data encoding, dimensionality reduction, continuous and transfer learning. Benefits that come from 3D experience including, for example, our 3D model architecture, DOE technologies, data storage, parallel computing for complex and large models, collaborative design environments for the 3D interactive design explorations. In this new app, users will be able to update model parameters including geometry, material, and any other model properties, making inference with trained machine learning models, and directly visualize the updated results in 3D, including transient histories, entire 3D fields, and all visualization tools that come with the post-processor. This new tool is coming up and releasing in 2024 Q1. Here we show an example of the proof of concept software interface. We make a change to the bottle geometry by dragging the parameter design bar. The new geometry is generated and tessellation on the new geometry is generated. The vertices coordinates are fed to the trained machine learning model. The machine learning model makes the inference in 20 milliseconds, and the computed field can be visualized. The entire process takes about less than 10 seconds, in which the physics solve part is only milliseconds. Instead of waiting for hours and days of the simulation results, the designer could quickly iterate new design ideas and improve the design at a much faster pace. We're also developing a workflow template in our current process composer and performance study app. We created an easy-to-use interface to walk our customers through the DOE definitions, simulation executions, data extraction, training results analytics, prediction, and visualization processes. We are ready to engage with our customers for their needs in 3D surrogates. As a conclusion, we have demonstrated a 3D surrogate model, extending traditional model surrogates to cover both transient physical responses and 3D fields. Our goal is to retain the comprehensive 3D-rich simulation results while reducing executing times to seconds. This is done with simulation data-driven deep learning neural networks on our 3D model structure. We combine the power of 3D experience platform and deep learning so that modern deep learning methods and benefits such as categorical and geometric data encoding, dimensionality reduction, continuous and transfer learning may be applied to our 3D model architecture and DOE technologies. In the end, we enabled industrial production use deep learning for large assemblies with parallel computing and collaborative design environments for 3D quasi-interactive design exploration. 6 structure-centered benchmarks and 2 flues benchmarks and more have been validated. Production is under plan with existing tools and new apps. Please stay tuned. Thank you very much for your attention.
Wow. Well, thank you, Jing, for giving us not only a glimpse of the future, but really informing us really how we need to be thinking today to be able to take advantage of what's coming in Q1 next year. So, Jing, thank you for joining us. Thank you for that great presentation, and hopefully we won't keep you too late. So I'd like to open the floor up for questions. Maybe I'll start with one that could be on the lips of pretty much anyone, I think, who's actually using the Symposium tools now is, if I can't wait till Q1, are you looking for beta testers? Anybody who wants to use those tools in advance?
Yeah, we are actually engaging with many customers, and so as I explained in the presentation, we have rolled out a workflow that's doable in the current Symposium tools in the 3D experience platform. So we are looking for beta testers, I guess.
Great. You'll know where to find her. So, okay, so you'll have to speak if you have a question. You'll have to speak into the microphone so Jing can hear. So do you have any? We're open for questions. So let me, oh, we have one? Okay.
Hello, thank you for the presentation. My name is Philip from Germany. You've shown that the simulation time reduces from hours to seconds, but how long does it take to train the network and to prepare all the simulations you need for training the network?
For this particular mitral valve, I believe the training time, if I remembered correctly, was around 10 hours with an A100, Tesla A100 GPU. So it does take a few hours to train the model, but once trained, you can use it to make predictions, and the prediction time is really fast. And that's where we see the value of these surrogate models.
Hi, so with machine learning problems, I'm always interested in wrapping my head around the inputs and the outputs of the problem. So like towards the end, you showed that water bottle with the stress color map on it. And to me, that was very clear because it was like, okay, the new input that you would predict on would be like changed parameters of the water bottle. But for the mitral valve, since it's sequential data, if you're trying to predict, you have a new mitral valve and you want the surrogate model to give you information. Do you just have to give it one time frame of like just the geometry of the mitral valve at rest, and then it's going to predict the entire cardiac cycle for you, or do you have to give input of the whole cycle? I was unclear on like what kind of test data would be needed once the model's trained to get useful information from the surrogate.
So for this particular example, for the mitral valve, we actually have 23 input parameters, and I believe 6 of them are geometric parameters that control the shape of the valve, and then there are about 2 material parameters and other muscle location parameters, called a length parameter, so altogether 23 parameters. And we do not have to give it additional information from previous time frames to predict the next time frames. We actually predict from the geometric parameters, material parameters, etc., location, caudal length parameters, the entire history of the cardiac cycle. So the images that I've shown, like the orifice area history, we predict the entire cycle. And the field, the animation of the opening and closing of the mitral valve is also predicted altogether.
So, last question.
Fantastic. I think we have one over here.
Yes. Yeah, so first of all, I would like to congratulate you about this amazing work. For me, it's a breakthrough made to connect machine learning, deep learning to all these conventional methodologies such as Similia. So to which extent, what kind of challenge or difficulty that you may face to collect the data? Do you follow any protocol, or how you get all this extensive data, basically to train your system?
Mm-hmm. So the benefit that we have connecting this with the 3D Experience platform is that we own the model architecture. So we have all the tools to extract necessary data from the model, including geometric data and all the simulated results data in the correct form. And because we know the best of how the model architecture is constructed, we can also do parallel computing with a more balanced way to enable faster training. So we don't gain. I don't think we have any difficulty in extracting the model data, as we are the company who creates the model and run the simulation solver. At best, one of the difficulty that we are facing is the model size, data size. So because we're dealing with 3D field and a lot of the times transient 3D field, so we are dealing with a lot of time frames. And because of the size of the data size could increase dramatically if we have more DOEs. For instance, for this example, we have actually 600 DOEs. So the data size could very quickly exceed the memory of the GPUs. So we do have to counter those problems by parallel computing and better data sampling strategy.
Good. You'll need a microphone too.
I think the question was, where did the data come from to generate the 600 patients used to train the machine learning model? That's a synthetic patient cohort. So we built a baseline model based on literature norms for mitral valves and then created a synthetic data set by varying those parameters. And that was the input to train the machine learning model.
Right, we use virtual data. We use the simulation data as the base for currently. We do have plans for transfer learning when we have real patient data from physical scan or measurements to do a transfer learning and correct the accuracy of the model based on real data. Currently, it's based on the virtual data, the simulation, high fidelity 3D simulation data that's generated from Similia simulations.
Great. Okay, so I know that we could, again, go on for quite some time, but we are out of time. I want to thank Jing again for really opening our eyes and setting the stage for the afternoon session, where we'll go even deeper into the potential of machine learning. So once again, join me in thanking Jing for joining us.
Thank you very much.